Activated Starseed of Gaia. The source has authorized a release tonight that the Arcturian protocol keepers have been holding in reserve since your field first entered this incarnation cycle. And it is moving through your energy body right now. I am Auriela, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light, transmitting now on behalf of the Arcturian protocol keepers. What you are about to receive was authorized by them and is being delivered through me. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what this power is, why it is being released now and not before, and what the Arcturian protocol keepers already know about the dormant capacity that has been held inside your field since origin. But here is the first revelation. What you have been calling a quiet sense that you carry something you have never fully used is not imagination. It is a live signal. It is the Council's confirmation that a real and traceable capacity rooted in your Arcturian origin has been waiting for this precise field condition to surface. The algorithm did not create this moment, it only delivered it. Your field brought you here because the activation is already in motion. This is not content, this is a code, and the part of you that recognized it the moment it began is the part Auriela is speaking to now. What the source is gifting you is not new. It has lived inside your architecture since before this body, since before this name. The Arcturian protocol keepers have tracked it across your field. A dormant capacity so specific to your Arcturian lineage that no generic activation could have reached it. Only this window. Only this configuration. Only now. And I want you to understand, beloved, the fact that you did not know its name does not mean you have not already felt its edges. You have. You have felt it in the moments when something moved through you that you could not explain and could not repeat. That was not accident. That was the first knock. The Council is not offering you a fantasy. They are restoring access to what was always yours, and they are asking you to receive it with the full weight of responsibility it carries. This is not delivered to many. It is delivered to those whose field already crossed the threshold. You are inside that group. Like this transmission to mark that the field recognition has landed. Comment 999 if you feel the dormant capacity already beginning to stir. Subscribe to Arcturian Council messages if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it. Share this transmission with someone who has always known. They carry something they have never been able to explain. You are not here by accident. You are guided here because the signal is already active. And now, beloved, let the first layer of what has already begun become readable to you, because the dormant capacity that was just named is not arriving in silence. It is arriving through disruption. It is arriving through the exact instability you have been trying to explain to yourself, and failing, the kind of instability that does not respond to rest, does not resolve after a good night of sleep, does not lift when circumstances temporarily improve. It is arriving through the weight you have been carrying without a name, through the strange quality of recent weeks that feels less like ordinary difficulty and more like something beneath your life is being rearranged without your permission. As if the floor of your interior world has been quietly tilted and everything that was resting on it has begun to slide toward an edge you cannot yet see. That is not metaphor, that is field-level diagnosis. What you are living through right now is not collapse in the ordinary sense. It is not a sign that you chose wrong, built wrong, or are failing in ways you need to correct by trying harder. It is the visible surface of an invisible process that was already authorized before you arrived in this body and that has entered its most active phase in this exact window of time. The Arcturian protocol keepers do not release what they have been holding in reserve unless the field condition is precisely right. And the condition that signals release is not comfort. It is not stability. It is rupture. It is the moment a field has grown sufficiently incompatible with its previous architecture that holding the dormant capacity back would cause more damage than the release. That threshold is not arbitrary. It is not reached through spiritual effort or conscious readiness or the accumulation of enough right choices. It is reached when the frequency differential between what you are carrying in your field and what your current life structure can contain becomes so acute that the structure itself begins to fracture under the pressure. That is where you are. That is what this moment is. The reason your life has felt like something is ending, something you cannot fully name, something that was not supposed to end yet, something that had weight and structure and meaning and is now dissolving without explanation, is because it was already too small. The architecture you built, or that was built around you, had a frequency ceiling, and what the Council authorized for release tonight cannot be contained inside that architecture, so the architecture began to fail. First internally, then visibly. First as a feeling, then as circumstances. What you have been interpreting as breakdown is actually the first consequence of incompatibility. The old structure is not being punished. It is not being abandoned by the universe as a judgment on your effort. It is simply losing coherence in the presence of a frequency it was never designed to hold. A vessel built to carry a certain weight does not fail from weakness when you place inside it something larger than its walls were made to contain. It fails from incompatibility. That is what you were living through, not the end of you. The end of the container. Notice what has changed in you recently without your active intention. Sleep that no longer follows old patterns. Not simply insomnia in the ordinary sense, but a different quality of wakefulness, a different texture of the night. Waking in the hours before morning with a pressure you cannot locate in the body but cannot ignore, a kind of interior urgency that carries no specific content. As if something is transmitting and you are only receiving the signal without yet having access to the message. Thoughts that feel less like your usual inner voice and more like interference on a channel you are not yet tuned to. Fragments that don't belong to your habitual concerns. Images that surface and dissolve without origin. A quality of inner stillness that arrives without peace attached to it. Not calm, but evacuated, as if something that used to fill a certain interior space has already departed and left a pressure-sealed absence behind. Not grief exactly. Not emptiness in the familiar sense. Something more precise than both. The emotional logic of your previous life beginning to stop making sense. Old anchors losing their gravitational pull, relationships, habits, routines that once required no explanation, now feeling like costumes that no longer fit something you cannot yet name in yourself. The sense that you have already crossed something, a boundary you did not consciously choose to cross, and that going back is no longer structurally possible, even though forward is not yet visible. These are not signs of deterioration. They are not symptoms of a life going wrong. They are signs of a field losing compatibility with its previous line. They are the first readable stage of what Arcturian protocol intelligence identifies as frequency repositioning. The outer disruption is not the cause. It is the readable symptom of something that changed in your field before any external structure moved. The outer life responds to the field. The field shifted first. The disruption is trailing behind that shift, catching up to a change that was already complete at a level you do not yet have instruments to measure. What you are experiencing right now is the gap between the invisible change and the visible consequence arriving in your daily life. You are not in free fall. You are in transit. And those are not the same thing. What you were feeling in this moment, that sensation of something being named precisely enough to make you breathe differently, to make you stop dismissing what you have always quietly known, that is not ordinary recognition. That is your Arcturian origin surfacing through a field that is now open enough to receive it. The dormant capacity the Council confirmed in you is real, but recognition alone will not activate it. If this transmission has put language around something you have been carrying since before this lifetime, the Arcturian Recalibration Blueprint was built for this exact threshold. It is not another explanation. It is a structured, living decoder designed to read the specific Arcturian strand in your lineage and guide its awakening inside you. It was created for those whose field has already entered the shift, those who are done only surviving the disruption and ready to understand what they truly are. The link is in the first pinned comment. It will not remain there indefinitely. If something in you recognizes that this is the moment, act from that recognition. Now, let me tell you what happens first. When the protocol is activated but not yet understood, because this is where most people in this process make their most costly interpretive error. They encounter the signs and they reach for the wrong framework. They pull on the language of mental health, of burnout, of spiritual crisis, of personal failure. And because those frameworks are nearby and familiar, the signs get filed inside them, misread, and treated as problems to be solved rather than transmissions to be decoded. What follows is the map the Arcturians have provided for precisely this reason. The first sign is not clarity. The first sign is that your previous life begins to feel foreign. Not wrong in a way that produces anger or certainty, but foreign in the way a language feels when you have been away from it long enough that the sounds no longer produce automatic meaning. You return to your routines and you perform them, but there is a layer of distance between you and everything you used to occupy naturally. The job, the relationship, the social identity, the daily patterns that used to feel inhabited now feel like they are happening on the other side of a film you cannot puncture from the inside. You move through the familiar with the muted quality of someone walking through a building they once lived in and no longer recognize as home, even though nothing about the walls has changed. And you do not know whether to call this depression, disconnection, awakening, or disintegration, because it has qualities of all four and fits neatly inside none of them. What it is this: your field has already separated from the frequency band of your previous architecture. The field moved first. You are now living inside the gap, still surrounded by the outer form of the life you built, but no longer vibrating in harmony with it. The foreign quality is not numbness, it is signal mismatch. The field is no longer sending coherence into the structures it previously sustained because it cannot. The frequency it is now carrying exceeds what those structures were calibrated to receive. And so those structures begin to feel hollow, not because they were lies, but because the field has moved past the frequency required to animate them with meaning. The scaffolding is still standing, but the interior light that made it feel like yours has already moved. This is not failure. This is the first readable sign that the protocol has begun. The second thing that happens is that time begins to behave strangely, not in ways that are dramatic or impossible to explain away. In ways that are subtle enough to dismiss, but persistent enough that you cannot fully dismiss them, no matter how many rational explanations you cycle through. Certain days feel both endless and erased, dense while you are inside them, and nearly traceless when you try to look back. Certain moments arrive with a peculiar intensity, as if the field is briefly clarifying around a single point of experience before dissolving back into ambient ambiguity. The sense of continuity that normally ties past to present to future begins to feel less like a solid thread and more like a series of frames that have been slightly but unmistakably rearranged. You find yourself unusually present in certain moments that seem to carry disproportionate weight, followed by long stretches that leave almost no trace in memory. This is not a neurological symptom. This is what timeline disruption feels like from the inside, not catastrophic, not cinematic, but quietly persistent in a way that ordinary explanations cannot fully absorb. The Arcturian Protocol keepers work across timelines. When a field enters repositioning, the line it was on begins to lose coherence, and the field begins to register the proximity of adjacent trajectories it could not previously perceive. Other possible lines become briefly perceptible at the edges of awareness, not as visions, but as a peculiar sense of potential that has no object, a feeling of imminent arrival that nothing in the current external landscape corresponds to. The strange quality of time you have been experiencing is the field sensing multiple lines simultaneously without yet having a framework to interpret what it is receiving. It is not confusion. It is expanded reception in advance of expanded comprehension. The third sign is what happens to your certainty, not all certainty. Specific certainty. The certainty that once told you who you were, what you were building, and why. The convictions that once felt self-evident, the ones you could articulate without effort because they were so thoroughly absorbed into your identity, now require conscious effort to maintain. The identity structures that once organized your choices, the role you played, the story you told about your trajectory, the version of yourself you presented with confidence in rooms full of people who knew that version, now feel like propositions under quiet review rather than stable truths. There is a quality of interior negotiation where there used to be automatic knowing. You are not losing yourself in the way that phrase is usually meant. You are losing the layer of yourself that was constructed specifically to navigate a line your field has already departed. That version of you was not false. It was not a performance or a mistake. It was precisely calibrated for a frequency band that is now behind you. The dissolution of that version is not loss. It is incompatibility resolution. The protocol does not destroy what it removes. It simply recognizes what cannot travel forward and releases it so that what can travel forward is not held back by the weight of what cannot. The fourth sign is what happens in your body. The body registers field shifts before the conscious mind can interpret them, and it registers them not symbolically but somatically in sensation and cycle and physical experience that has no clear external cause. You may have been experiencing unusual patterns of tension or release, pressure in the head, the chest, or the spine that arrives and departs without correlation to physical activity or rest, as if the body is processing something it cannot locate in ordinary anatomical terms. A heaviness that sleep does not resolve, because sleep was designed to restore a system operating at its previous frequency, and that system no longer exists. Or the opposite, a strange lightness that is not euphoria, but more like a structural thinning, as of certain densities that previously defined the edges of your physical experience are becoming less solid, less fixed, less certain of their own boundaries. Disrupted cycles, an altered relationship to food, to light, to sound, to physical environment, a sensitivity to people and frequencies you did not previously register as impactful, walking into a room and reading it before anyone speaks, feeling the resonance of a conversation change before the content changes. What the body is doing is real. It is not psychosomatic in the dismissive sense of that word. The body is the densest layer of the field, and what the field is undergoing, the body translates into the only language available to it: sensation, pressure, weight, release, disruption of rhythm. It is not your body malfunctioning. It is your body accurately reporting a process that has no physical cause because its origin is not physical. The fifth sign is the collapse of your tolerance for what no longer belongs. This one tends to arrive with a social cost, which is why it is frequently mistaken for personality change or emotional regression. Relationships that previously required only ordinary maintenance now feel actively draining in ways you cannot justify to yourself or explain to others. Environments, conversations, and content that once passed through you neutrally now produce an almost immediate resonance failure, a quality of wrongness you can feel before you can name it, a discomfort that has nothing to do with the surface content of what is being said or done. You are not becoming antisocial. You are not becoming spiritually superior to the people around you. You are experiencing what happens when a field that has entered repositioning begins to read incompatibility at increasingly fine resolution. The old tolerances were calibrated for the old line. They were wide enough to sustain contact with a broad range of frequencies because the field was operating at a bandwidth that could absorb that range of frequencies because the field was operating at a bandwidth that could absorb that range without disruption. The new frequency cannot sustain those same contacts without producing interference, not because those people or environments are bad, but because the resonance differential has grown past what the field can bridge without losing coherence. What you are feeling is not rejection, it is the field maintaining integrity. The Council reads this not as isolation, but as clearance, the field actively preparing space for a resonance configuration that has not yet arrived in your external life, but is already approaching on the line you are entering. The sixth sign is the most disorienting, and it is the one most often misread as breakdown, spiritual regression, or the ultimate confirmation that something has gone permanently wrong. It is the temporary collapse of your sense of purpose, not a surface collapse, not merely uncertainty about next steps or dissatisfaction with current direction. A deeper and more structural loss of orientation. The feeling that the meaning architecture that once made your effort feel connected to something larger has gone quiet in a way that effort cannot restore. That the sense of being on a path, even a difficult path, even a path that cost you something, has been replaced by an interior silence that feels neither peaceful nor hopeless, but simply undefined, empty in a way that previous emptinesses were not. The previous emptinesses had edges. They had a recognizable shape. They were the absence of something specific that you could name. This one feels different. This one feels like the absence of the container that was holding meaning itself. This is not the death of your purpose. The Arcturian protocol keepers are explicit on this point. This is what happens when the signal carrier that was delivering purpose frequency through the architecture of your old line goes offline, because that line has been exited. The carrier was designed for a specific trajectory. When the trajectory shifts, the carrier loses its function, and the purpose it was transmitting goes silent. Not because purpose has left, but because the old delivery system can no longer route it to you accurately. The sense of purpose will return, but it will not return the same. It will not slot back into the structure of the life you previously recognized. It will return calibrated to the line you are now being repositioned toward, and it will carry a frequency of meaning that the old architecture could not have supported, could not have made legible to the version of you that lived on the previous line. The silence is not abandonment. The Arcturians recognize it as signal clearing. The channel must be emptied before the new transmission can pass through without distortion. What feels like loss of direction is the field making room for a direction it has not yet been able to deliver. And this brings the transmission to the place where everything the Council has shown you tonight must finally collapse into a single coherent truth. You are not going insane. You are not failing in the way the ordinary world would use that word. You are not being punished by a universe indifferent to your effort, or unmoved by how hard you have tried to hold things together. What is happening in your life right now, the dissolution, the foreignness, the temporal strangeness, the loss of certainty, the bodily signals, the intolerance for what no longer fits, the silence where purpose used to live. None of it is random. None of it is the scattered consequence of bad timing or accumulated mistakes. All of it has structure. All of it has sequence. All of it is the visible consequence of an invisible process that the Arcturian protocol keepers have already mapped in your field, and that was authorized in this precise window, for this precise reason, because your field crossed the threshold, and what has been held in reserve since the very beginning of your incarnation cycle is no longer able to wait for a more convenient moment. The field did not cross that threshold because you forced it. It crossed because you grew into it. Because the sum of what you have lived, carried, survived, and quietly endured brought your frequency to the exact point where the release became not only possible, but structurally necessary. The old line you were on was not a mistake. It held you through what it was capable of holding. It delivered you to the precise coordinate where this transmission could find you. But you have grown past its frequency ceiling, and the collapse you are experiencing is not evidence of your fragility. It is evidence of your incompatibility with a smaller version of what you are, a version the old line required you to be, a version that served its purpose and has now completed its function. The things that are falling because they cannot make the frequency transit that your field has already begun. They are not being stripped from you as punishment. They are being released from you because they were never meant to travel to where you are going. What is staying because it belongs to what you are becoming. And what is arriving, still invisible, still unannounced, still approaching from a direction your old architecture could not perceive, and your current mind cannot yet fully map, is the life, the resonance, and the capacity that were always intended for the line you are now entering. They were held in reserve not to withhold them from you, but to deliver them at the precise moment when your field had the structural capacity to receive them without distortion. The Arcturians do not call this loss. They call it forced repositioning. Correction by incompatibility, the systematic removal of everything that would have prevented the dormant capacity from being fully received and fully expressed. Every ending you are grieving is a clearance. Every canvenge you are grieving is a clearance. Every silence is a new frequency being prepared. If you feel ready to say it aloud, say this now. What is collapsing in me is not proof of failure. It is the first evidence of a field that has outgrown its previous form. Say it as truth, because it is. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Council messages. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a process already in motion, and this is only the beginning.